Time inevitably inverts the relationship between parent and child. The capable adults who once provided constant care slowly become fragile, and in the eyes of their adult children, they often transition from anchors of support to logistical liabilities. Modern society has built an entire industry to manage this transition. The nursing home, or elder care facility, offers a sterilized, professional solution designed specifically to absorb the daily requirements of aging, allowing families to comfortably outsource the work of caregiving. Consider a common scenario. A young man sits in the administrative office of a facility. He has just signed the final admission papers, completing the transaction to leave his elderly father in their custody. As he packs up his folder, there is a quiet, lingering guilt over leaving his father behind, but it is perfectly balanced by the sharp, undeniable relief of handing off a massive responsibility. The paperwork is done. The son stands up, gives his father a final reassuring nod, and turns his back to walk out the front doors and return to his independent life. But halfway down the hall, he stops. He glances back toward the waiting area and notices his father engaged in a warm, familiar conversation, laughing easily with the facility's manager. The image makes no sense. A man who is actively experiencing the disorientation and grief of being left by his family is somehow sharing a moment of genuine, relaxed joy with a complete stranger. The dissonance is too loud to ignore. The son abandons his exit, steps back into the waiting room, and walks over to the manager, turning a simple administrative drop-off into a confrontation with something he doesn't understand. He interrupts their conversation with a simple, direct question. "How do you know my father?" To understand their connection, we must trace a path back exactly 30 years. The manager explains he previously directed an orphanage. There, the father filled out papers and voluntarily adopted a young boy, the very boy standing before him. The son's entire identity, his freedom, and his ability to walk out of those doors today are completely reliant on a quiet, unprompted choice made by the man he was just attempting to discard. Place the defining actions of these two men side by side, and a stark contrast emerges in how they handle vulnerability. When the father was in his prime, he looked at a helpless child, assumed full responsibility for someone else's survival, and pulled that boy out of a sterile institution to build a family. 30 years later, that same boy, now in his prime, looked at his helpless father, relinquished his responsibility, and pushed the man out of his family to place him into an institution. It exposes a harsh reality about the nature of sacrifice. Doing the right thing does not guarantee protection. In fact, virtuous actions often carry a delayed, heavy cost. By choosing to rescue a vulnerable child, the father directly placed his own future in the hands of the exact person who would eventually sign the paperwork to abandon him. Hearing this truth, the son's internal justification for being there collapses. The careful balance of guilt and relief evaporates instantly. He can no longer view his father as a biological parent who was obligated by nature to raise him. He has to recognize him as a conscious savior who actively elected to take him in. That single piece of information dismantles the idea of the father as a liability. It is impossible to view someone as an inconvenient requirement when you realize your entire existence is the result of their charity. Confronting the reality of a completely unselfish act demands a total re-evaluation of duty. It forces us to examine what we actually owe to the people who chose to sacrifice their resources for our survival. Leaving the author of your life isolated precisely when they reach the most fragile chapter of theirs is a severe moral failure. The final stage of a parent's life offers a finite window to return the same degree of unasked-for grace they provided at the beginning. Supporting those who built the foundation of our lives represents a rare opportunity for reciprocity, one of the few moments where we can finally act with the same selfless intent